The Astral Defiance hung motionless in the void, its gunmetal hull scarred by 1,000 battles across the Rim territories. Captain Cathera Voss stood on the bridge, her weathered hands gripping the command rail as she stared at the impossible, readings flooding her tactical display. The Nexus Wormhole, humanity's most critical transit point, pulsed with malevolent energy as massive shapes began emerging from its swirling maw. "Captain," called out Navigator Zephyr Corin, his voice tight with barely contained panic. "I'm reading dimensional distortions unlike anything in our databases. Whatever's coming through, it's big. Really big." Voss felt her blood turn to ice as the first ship materialized completely. It was a leviathan of organic metal and crystalline protrusions, easily 10 times the size of her heavy cruiser. Then came another, and another. "Helios-class dreadnought," whispered Tactical Officer Nexus Valdris, his fingers dancing across his console. "No. Bigger. Much bigger. I count 17 so far, with more emerging." The communications array crackled to life with panicked transmissions from the nearby colony worlds. Epsilon Centauri, New Geneva, the mining stations of the Kepler Belt, all screaming for evacuation assistance as the alien armada spread like a cancer through local space. "Sir," Valdris continued, his voice hollow, "I'm detecting weapon signatures that exceed our entire fleet's combined firepower. These aren't raiders or explorers. This is a full-scale invasion force." Voss closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 50 million human lives pressing down on her shoulders. The nearest fleet elements were 6 hours away, 6 hours too long. The emergency protocols were clear. A single ship against impossible odds was meant to gather intelligence and retreat, but retreat meant abandoning the colonies to certain annihilation. "Helm," she ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around her. "Take us to the wormhole's edge, close enough to block the exit vector." "Captain," Pilot Raven Thorn's voice cracked with disbelief. That's a suicide run." "No," Voss replied, studying the tactical display with the calculating gaze of a woman who had spent 30 years turning impossible odds into victories. "That's buying time." The Astral Defiance began its approach, its lone form dwarfed by the emerging alien titans. As they drew closer, Voss could see the intricate details of the enemy vessels, biomechanical nightmares that seemed to breathe and pulse with their own twisted life. "Communications," she commanded. "Broadcast on all frequencies. Tell the colonies. They have 6 hours to evacuate. Tell them we're going to give them every second we can." The ship shuddered as it entered the wormhole's gravitational field, exotic particles washing over the hull like cosmic rain. Behind them, the invasion fleet began to spread out, their weapons powering up with an ominous crimson glow. "Captain," Valdris reported, "they're targeting us, multiple lock-ons." Voss smiled grimly, her hand moving to the ship's neural interface crown. "Then let's give them something to think about. Activate the Prometheus protocol." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of charging systems. Every crew member knew what the Prometheus protocol meant. It was humanity's most classified weapon system, reserved for extinction-level threats. "Captain," Corin said quietly, "once we activate it, there's no going back." "There never was," Voss replied, settling the crown onto her head. "Humanity doesn't run from fights. We run toward them." The neural crown interfaced with Voss's consciousness, flooding her mind with the ship's sensory data. Suddenly, she could feel every rivet, every power conduit, every weapon system as if they were extensions of her own body. The Astral Defiance wasn't just her ship anymore. It was her. Around her, the crew worked with practiced efficiency, their movements synchronized by years of combat together. Engineer Stellan Forge's hands flew over his console as he rerouted. "Power from life support to weapons systems. Prometheus core online, Captain. We're running at a 150% normal capacity." The lead alien dreadnought, easily 3 kilometers long, rotated its massive bulk toward them, biomechanical weapon ports opening like hungry mouths. Streams of corrosive plasma lanced toward the Astral Defiance, only to splash harmlessly against the ship's newly amplified shields. Impossible, Voss heard through the ship's translation matrix. The alien communication channels were alive with confusion and growing concern. Through the neural link, she felt rather than saw the tactical situation. 17 capital ships, each capable of glassing a planet. 43 escort vessels with Psi, enough firepower to level continents. And her, one human ship blocking the wormhole like a cork in a bottle. Target their lead ship, she commanded, her voice echoing both through the bridge speakers and directly into the ship's targeting systems. Full spread, quantum torpedoes. The astral defiance unleashed its fury. Quantum torpedoes, each one capable of destabilizing matter at the subatomic level, streaked toward the alien flagship. The weapons struck, and for a moment, reality itself seemed to hiccup as the torpedo's effects rippled across the dreadnought's hull. The alien ship's biomechanical armor began to unravel, molecular chains dissolving into constituent atoms. But the creature was vast, and even as sections of its hull disappeared, it continued its advance. Damage assessment, Voss ordered, though she could already feel the answer through the neural link. 30% hull integrity lost on the target, Valdris reported. But Captain, look at the wormhole readings. The tactical display showed something unprecedented. The quantum torpedo detonations had destabilized the wormhole's exotic matter field. Energy feedback was cascading back through the portal, and the remaining alien ships were finding it increasingly difficult to maintain their formation. They're caught between dimensions, Corin breathed. The wormhole is becoming unstable. A new voice cut through the chaos, alien but somehow familiar. Human vessel, you have caused significant disruption to our emergence protocols. Withdraw immediately or face annihilation. Voss laughed, the sound carrying across all frequencies. You want to annihilate my people? You'll have to go through me first, and I'm not nearly as easy to kill as you might think. The alien fleet began to converge on her position, their weapons charging with deadly intent. But Voss had spent decades studying xeno-warfare tactics, and she knew something they didn't. Helm, emergency acceleration, Mark 270. Take us into the wormhole itself. Captain, that's insane, suicidal? Maybe. But it's also the last thing they'll expect. The astral defiance dove into the swirling vortex of the wormhole, its hull groaning under the stress of compressed space-time. Around them, the alien fleet scrambled to adjust their attack vectors. But the confined space worked against their superior numbers. In the twisting corridor between dimensions, Voss felt the ship's AI merge more completely with her consciousness. She could sense the wormhole's structure, its weak points, its vulnerabilities. And she began to understand exactly how 17 alien dreadnoughts could be turned into their own worst enemy. Stellan, she called out, can you reverse the polarity? On our deflector array? In a wormhole? Captain, that could create a dimensional cascade. Exactly. Inside the wormhole's twisted geometry, the astral defiance danced between dimensions, while the alien fleet struggled to maintain coherent formation. Voss could feel the exotic matter currents flowing around them like a three-dimensional river, and through the neural link, she began to understand their structure. Deflector array at negative polarity, Engineer Forge reported, his voice tight with concentration. Captain, we're generating a lot of exotic particle feedback. The wormhole's structure is becoming increasingly unstable. The alien dreadnoughts had formed a crude sphere around the wormhole's exit, their biomechanical hulls pulsing with frustrated energy. But their size, which had been such an advantage in open space, now worked against them in the confined dimensions of the portal. They're trying to box us in, Valdris observed, tracking the enemy movements on his display. But they can't maneuver effectively in here. Voss smiled grimly. Through the neural interface, she could feel the alien ship's confusion as they attempted to target a vessel that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Prometheus protocol had synchronized her consciousness with the ship's quantum processors, allowing her to perceive and react to threats across probability matrices. Incoming transmission, Communications Officer Lyra Nexus announced. Multiple, frequencies, high-priority alien command codes. Let's hear what they have to say, Voss replied. The voice that filled the bridge was different from before, older, more authoritative. Human Commander, I am Vex Thul, Fleet Sovereign of the Mordani Collective. Your resistance is unexpected. We offer you terms. I'm listening. Withdraw your vessel and allow our passage. In exchange, we will spare your outer colonies. Your core worlds will be preserved for integration into our collective. Voss felt the weight of that decision. 50 million lives in the outer systems, hundreds of millions in the core worlds. The mathematics were brutal, but the choice was clear. Counteroffer, she replied. Turn around, go back where you came from, and I won't collapse this wormhole with your entire fleet inside it. The alien laughter that echoed through the speakers was like grinding metal. One ship against 17 dreadnoughts? Your bravado is admirable but pointless. One ship, maybe. But 17 dreadnoughts trapped in a dimensional bottleneck? That's a different equation entirely. To demonstrate her point, Voss triggered a controlled burst from the deflector array. The exotic matter discharge created a temporary dimensional shear that sliced through the hull of the nearest escort vessel like a hot knife through butter. The alien ship simply ceased. Not destroyed, not vaporized, but edited out of existence, as the dimensional boundary reasserted itself. Impossible, Vex Thul hissed. Your technology cannot— Your mistake, Voss interrupted, is assuming I'm using technology. This is something else entirely. This is humanity refusing to quit. The neural link carried more than just sensory data now. It carried the accumulated determination of every human who had ever faced impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. The ship's AI, influenced by this resolve, began calculating attack vectors that existed in probability space rather than physical reality. All hands, brace for quantum displacement, Voss announced, feeling the ship's systems respond to her mental commands. We're going hunting. The Astral Defiance phased partially out of normal space-time, becoming a ghost ship that existed in the quantum foam between dimensions. To the alien fleet, it appeared to multiply, attacking from impossible angles while remaining frustratingly untouchable. Quantum torpedoes materialized inside enemy hulls, their warheads detonating in spaces that shouldn't exist. Plasma beams curved through folded space to strike targets that were technically behind cover. And through it all, the wormhole's exotic matter field continued to destabilize, trapping the invasion fleet in an increasingly unstable pocket of reality. They're panicking, Valdris reported, his voice filled with amazement. The smaller ships are breaking formation, trying to retreat back through the wormhole. Let them go, Voss commanded. But the dreadnoughts stay. They're too dangerous to let escape. The retreat of the escort vessels only made the situation worse for the remaining capital ships. With less mass to stabilize the wormhole's exotic battlefield, the dimensional boundaries began to collapse inward like a slow-motion implosion. Captain, Corrin called out, we need to get out of here. The wormhole's going critical. Not yet, Voss replied, her consciousness still merged with the ship's systems. We still have work to do. The collapsing wormhole created a maelstrom of twisted space-time, but Voss found herself oddly at peace within the chaos. The neural link had evolved beyond mere interface. She had become something new, a hybrid consciousness that could navigate probability itself. Captain, Forge's voice carried an edge of panic. Hull stress is approaching critical levels. We need to phase back into normal space. Negative, Voss replied, her awareness expanding across multiple dimensional layers. We're exactly where we need to be. Through the quantum sensors, she could perceive the alien dreadnoughts struggling against the dimensional currents. Their biomechanical hulls, evolved for warfare in normal space, were being systematically shredded by exotic matter interactions. Vex Thul's voice crackled through the communications array, distorted by the unstable space around them. Human, your actions will destroy us all. The wormhole collapse will consume your ship as well. Maybe, Voss admitted, feeling the astral defiance phase between dimensions like a shark moving through water. But I've been dead before. It didn't take. The cryptic reference wasn't lost on her crew. 3 years ago, during the Battle of Kepler's Edge, Voss had been clinically dead for 4 minutes after her previous ship was destroyed. The experience had changed her in ways that military psychologists were still trying to understand. "Sir," Valdris announced, "I'm reading massive quantum fluctuations in the enemy flagship. They're trying to force a dimensional jump." Voss felt it too. Vexthul's ship was attempting to phase shift out of the wormhole entirely, bypassing the dimensional constraints that trapped it. If successful, the massive dreadnought would rematerialize in normal space, free to continue. "Its mission of conquest. Not happening," she growled, directing the astral defiance toward the flagship's quantum signature. The ship responded to her mental commands, its quantum processors calculating attack vectors that existed in theoretical space. As they approached the enemy vessel, Voss could see the intricate patterns of its biomechanical architecture, a living ship that had been grown rather than built. "Stellan, can you create a quantum resonance field?" she asked. "In theory, yes. But the power requirements—" "Do it." The engineer's hands flew over his console, rerouting power from every non-essential system. The ship's lights dimmed as the deflector array began generating a field that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. "Field established," Forge reported. "But, Captain, this will drain our quantum batteries in less than 60 seconds. Then we'd better make them count." Voss guided the Astral Defiance alongside the alien flagship, the two ships now existing in a state of quantum superposition. To outside observers, they would appear as probability clouds rather than solid matter. "Resonance field is interfacing with their hull," Valdris reported. "I'm detecting massive feedback loops in their biomechanical systems." The alien ship began to convulse, its living components unable to process the quantum interference. Vexthul's voice filled the bridge, now carrying notes of genuine fear. "What are you doing to us?" "Teaching you about human stubbornness," Voss replied, her consciousness spreading through the quantum field to touch the alien ship's bio-neural networks. "We don't give up. We don't surrender. And we definitely don't let genocidal fleets pass." Through our space, the resonance field began to synchronize with the flagship's quantum signature, creating a feedback loop that propagated through the entire vessel. The ship's living components started to turn against each other, biomechanical systems attacking their own infrastructure. "All enemy vessels are showing critical damage," Karan reported. "The quantum cascade is spreading through their entire fleet." Voss felt the moment of decision approaching. The wormhole's collapse had reached a critical threshold. In seconds, the exotic matter field would implode, taking everything in the vicinity with it. She could phase the Astral Defiance back to normal space and escape, but that would mean abandoning the alien fleet to potentially survive the collapse. Or she could stay, ensuring their destruction, but almost certainly dooming her own ship and crew. "Captain," Lyra Nexus called out, "incoming transmission from the Colonial Defense Force. Admiral Corvus is requesting a status report." "Tell him," Voss said, her voice carrying across multiple dimensions, "that the wormhole is secure. And tell him," she paused, feeling the weight of what was coming, "tell him that humanity doesn't negotiate with extinction." The quantum field reached critical resonance, and the universe held its breath. The quantum resonance field achieved perfect synchronization with the alien flagship, and reality began to unravel in ways that defied conventional physics. Voss felt her consciousness expand beyond the neural link, touching the fundamental forces that held the universe together. "Captain," Forge's voice seemed to come from very far away, "quantum battery at 15% and falling. We need to phase back to normal space now." But Voss had seen something in the quantum foam, a pattern hidden within the chaos. The Mordani ships weren't just vessels. They were nodes in a vast network that stretched across multiple galaxies. This invasion fleet was merely the tip of a tendril that reached back to something unimaginably vast. "Stellan, reroute power from the quantum drive," she commanded. "We're going deeper." "Sir, that's our only way out of here. Trust me." Through the expanding resonance field, Voss could perceive the network's structure. The Mordani Collective wasn't just a species. It was a meta-organism that consumed entire civilizations, incorporating their biomass and technology into its ever-growing corpus. The invasion fleet carried quantum entanglement links back to the collective's core, allowing for instantaneous communication across galactic distances. "Valdris, I need you to target the quantum entanglement nodes on each ship," she ordered. "Not to destroy them, to hijack them." "Captain, that's theoretically impossible. The quantum encryption isn't designed to handle human creativity," Voss finished. "The collective thinks in terms of absorption and integration. They can't comprehend the concept of a species that refuses to be digested." The Astral Defiance extended its quantum field to encompass the entire alien fleet, now little more than probability ghosts trapped in the collapsing wormhole. But instead of annihilating them, Voss began to reprogram their quantum signatures. "What I'm about to do," she announced to her crew, "is going to send a message back through their network. Not words, but something deeper. I'm going to show the collective what humanity really is." The neural interface deepened, and Voss felt her consciousness merge not just with the ship, but with the quantum entanglement network itself. Suddenly, she was connected to the vast neural web of the Moradani collective, her thoughts propagating across light years at instantaneous speed. The collective's response was immediate and overwhelming, a psychic scream of billions of interconnected minds recoiling from contact with something they couldn't comprehend. Human individuality, the stubborn refusal to be absorbed, the willingness to die rather than submit. These concepts were like poison to the collective's unified consciousness. "Sir," Corin reported, his voice tight with strain, "I'm reading. Massive disruptions in the quantum field. The entanglement network it's fighting back," but Voss was already 3 steps ahead. Through the hijacked network, she could see the collective's true nature, a cosmic parasite that had consumed thousands of species across the galaxy. And she could see its weakness. "The network is two-way," she whispered, her voice carrying. "Cross dimensions. They thought they were just observing the invasion, but observation changes the observed." The quantum cascade began to propagate backwards through the entanglement links, carrying with it the essential nature of human defiance. Across the galaxy, Mordani vessels began to experience spontaneous failures as their bio-neural networks tried to process the concept of absolute refusal to surrender. "Captain," Valdris announced, his voice filled with awe, "I'm reading massive explosions across the quantum network. Ships are going critical throughout their entire fleet structure." Vex Thul's voice, now fragmented and distorted, echoed through the communications array. What have you done?" "I've introduced you to humanity," Voss replied, her consciousness now existing simultaneously in multiple dimensions. "We're not just another species to be consumed. We're an antimatter reaction to your kind of existence." The wormhole's collapse accelerated, exotic matter spiraling inward like water down a cosmic drain. But the quantum entanglement network was carrying the cascade effect far beyond the local space-time. "Sir," Lyra Nexus reported, "long-range sensors are detecting massive quantum disruptions throughout the Mordani network. It's like the entire collective is having a nervous breakdown." Voss smiled, feeling the weight of billions of lives across the galaxy as species after species threw off their Mordani overlords. The collective's strength, its unified consciousness, had become its fatal weakness when exposed to the quantum virus of human independence. "Phase us back to normal space," she ordered, her consciousness slowly withdrawing from the quantum network. "Our work here is done." As the Astral Defiance materialized in normal space-time, the wormhole collapsed behind them with a flash of exotic radiation. The Mordani invasion fleet was gone, erased from existence along with their dimensional conduit. 3 days after the wormhole collapse, the Astral Defiance limped into the Kepler station shipyards, her hull scorched and her quantum systems barely functional. But Captain Voss stood on her bridge with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had just rewritten the rules of galactic warfare. "Captain," Communications Officer Lyra Nexus announced, "we're receiving transmissions from across the galaxy. Hundreds of them." "Put them through," Voss ordered, settling into her command chair with a wince. The neural interface had left her with a persistent headache that felt like her thoughts were still echoing in multiple dimensions. The first voice that filled the bridge was speaking in the chittering language of the BlackHFY, a species that had been enslaved by the Mordani for 3 centuries. But the translation matrix carried more than words. It carried pure, unbridled joy. Human vessel, this is the BlackHFY Liberation Fleet. Your quantum cascade has freed our homeworld from the collective's control. Our bio-neural networks are our own again. We remember who we used to be. More transmissions followed. The crystalline Threndar, whose entire civilization had been absorbed into the collective's network 2 millennia ago, were broadcasting their first independent thoughts in generations. The aquatic Morguli had overthrown their collective overseers and were establishing their first free government in recorded history. 17 species have declared independence in the last 72 hours, Valdris reported, his voice filled with amazement. The quantum cascade disrupted the collective's control mechanisms across 3 galaxy clusters. Admiral Corvus materialized on the bridge via hologram, his weathered face showing a mixture of relief and bewilderment. Captain Voss, I need to understand exactly what happened out there. The long-range sensors show quantum disruptions extending far beyond our local cluster. Voss leaned back in her chair, considering how to explain the impossible. The Mordani collective made a fundamental error, Admiral. They assumed that consciousness was something that could be absorbed, digested, and integrated. They never encountered a species that would rather die than surrender its individuality. But how did one ship create such widespread effects? The collective's greatest strength was also its greatest weakness, she continued. Their quantum entanglement network allowed instantaneous communication across galactic distances. But it also meant that any disruption to their core consciousness would propagate throughout the entire system. Engineer Forge looked up from his damage assessment. The captain essentially introduced a virus into their network. Not a digital virus, but a conceptual one. The idea that consciousness could exist independently, that unity wasn't necessarily superior to diversity. The holographic admiral frowned. And this concept somehow caused their entire network to collapse? Not collapse, Voss corrected. Evolve. The species that were absorbed into the collective didn't disappear. They were just suppressed. When we showed them that resistance was possible, they remembered how to be themselves again. A new transmission interrupted their conversation. This one was different, older, more complex, carrying harmonics that seemed to resonate with the ship's quantum processors. This is the eternal archive of the Kethmori, the voice announced. We are the collective's oldest enemies, the last free civilization in the Andromeda Spiral. We have monitored your actions, Captain Voss. You have accomplished what we could, not in 10,000 years of warfare. Voss felt a chill run down her spine. What do you mean? The Mordani collective has existed for 50,000 years, consuming entire galaxies. We have fought them, studied them, sought ways to destroy them. But we never understood their true nature until now. They are not evil, Captain. They are simply incomplete. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. Incomplete how? They are half of an evolutionary equation, a species that achieved perfect unity but lost the ability to innovate, to create, to grow. They have been searching the universe for the other half of themselves, a species that could show them how to be individuals again. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Humanity hadn't just defeated the Mordani collective, they had completed them. What happens now? Voss asked. Now, the Kethmori replied, the universe begins to heal. The collective's absorbed. Species are remembering their independence. New alliances are forming. And somewhere in the space between galaxies, the Mordani are learning to be individuals for the first time in 50 millennia. Admiral Corvus shook his head in wonder. Captain, you realize what this means? Humanity just became the most important species in the galaxy. Voss looked out at the stars, feeling the weight of that responsibility. No, Admiral, we just became ourselves. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. As the astral defiance settled into its repair berth, quantum communications continued to flood in from across the galaxy, species after species announcing their newfound freedom, their rediscovered individuality, their gratitude to the humans who had shown them that unity and independence could coexist. The age of the collective was over. The age of the alliance was about to begin. 6 months after the Wormhole incident, as historians were already calling it, Captain Voss stood in the council chamber of the newly established Galactic Sovereignty Alliance. Representatives from 97 species surrounded her, their diverse forms a testament to the universe's recovered complexity. "The transformation continues," reported Zixandra, the first independent Mordani ambassador in 50,000 years. Her biomechanical form still showed traces of the collective's organic architecture, but her thoughts were unmistakably her own. Former collective territories are establishing autonomous governments at an unprecedented rate. The neural networks that once enforced unity now facilitate cooperation. Voss nodded, though she couldn't help but marvel at the irony. The same quantum entanglement network that had once suppressed individuality now served as the foundation for the fastest communication system in galactic history. "The philosophical implications are staggering," added Threndar Representative Kixtel, his crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed complex emotions. "For millennia, we believed the only path to galactic civilization was through absorption and unity. Humanity has shown us that diversity can be a strength rather than a weakness." Admiral Corvus entered the chamber, his expression grave. "Captain, we've received troubling reports from the Outer Rim. It seems not everyone is pleased with the new order." Voss turned to face him, noting the concern in his eyes. "What kind of reports?" "Several species that were never absorbed by the collective are viewing the new alliance with suspicion. They're calling us the human hegemony and claiming we're just another form of galactic domination." The chamber fell silent. This was the challenge they'd all been dreading. How to lead without controlling, how to inspire without commanding. "I'll address their concerns," Voss said simply. 3 days later, she stood aboard the Astral Defiance, now fully repaired and upgraded with hybrid human Mordani technology, as it approached the Rigel Confederation's territory. The Confederation represented 12 species that had successfully resisted the collective through isolation and aggressive defense. "Incoming transmission from the Confederation flagship," Lyra Nexus announced. The image that appeared on the main screen was that of Fleet Marshal Korvac, a reptilian humanoid whose species had been fighting the collective for 2,000 years. His amber eyes glowed with suspicion. "Captain Voss," he said, his voice carrying the weight of millennia of warfare. "You claim to come in peace, but your actions have destabilized the entire galactic order. How do we know you're not simply, a more subtle form of conquest?" Voss stepped forward, her hands clasped behind her back. "Marshal, I understand your concerns, but let me ask you this. In all your years of fighting the collective, did you ever see them negotiate? Did you ever see them withdraw from a fight? They could win? No. They consumed or were consumed. There was no middle ground. Then you understand what makes humanity different," Voss replied. "We could have used the quantum cascade to control the liberated species, to build our own empire. Instead, we gave them back their freedom and stepped aside. Yet you stand here as the de facto leader of the largest alliance in galactic history." "Not as a leader," Voss corrected. "As a catalyst. The alliance isn't built on human supremacy. It's built on the principle that every species has the right to determine its own destiny." The conversation continued for hours, but gradually, Marshal Korvac's suspicion gave way to curiosity, then to cautious respect. By the end of their meeting, the Rigel Confederation had agreed to establish diplomatic relations with the Alliance. As the Astral Defiance departed Confederation space, Voss reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. A year ago, she'd been a simple ship captain fighting pirates on the Rim. Now she was quite possibly the most influential human in the galaxy. "Captain," Navigator Corrin called from his station. "We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth. It's the President." The face that appeared on the screen was that of President Yates, the first human leader to address a truly galactic audience. Her expression was a mixture of pride and bewilderment. "Captain Voss," she began, "I want you to know that Earth stands behind your actions, but I also want you to understand the magnitude of what you've accomplished. Our xenobiologists estimate that you've freed over 300 billion sentient beings from collective control. The philosophical and ethical implications of that number are staggering." Voss nodded soberly. "I understand, Madam President. The question is, what do we do with that responsibility?" "We do what humans have always done," Yates replied with a slight smile. "We figure it out as we go along, we make mistakes, we learn from them, and we try to do better tomorrow than we did today." As the transmission ended, Voss found herself alone on the bridge, staring out at the stars. The galaxy was vast, complex, and full of species struggling to find their place in the new order. There would be conflicts, misunderstandings, and challenges that hadn't even been imagined yet. But for the first time in 50,000 years, the galaxy was truly free. "Helm," she said quietly, "set course for the Andromeda Spiral. I think it's time we introduced ourselves to the Keth Mori, face to face." As the astral defiance engaged its quantum drive, Voss felt a familiar sensation, the universe shifting around her as space-time folded. But this time, instead of fleeing toward an uncertain battle, she was flying toward an uncertain peace. And somehow, that felt like the greatest victory of all. The ship disappeared into the quantum foam, carrying with it the dreams and hopes of a galaxy learning to breathe free. Behind them, the alliance continued to grow, species after species choosing cooperation over conquest, diversity over unity, freedom over safety. The age of empire was over. The age of alliance had begun, and it had all started with one human ship that refused to move aside when faced with the impossible. In the depths of space, the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter,